Potter safe for now as Blues try to copy Arsenal model. Chelsea will not sack Graham Potter just yet, and his situation is unchanged despite Saturday's home defeat to Southampton, say the Eye. Miguel, it's a good reference point, isn't it? There were times where it felt like Mikel Arteta was very, very close to losing his job in previous seasons, but that persistence and patience that Arsenal showed is certainly paying off this season.
That's exactly it, yeah, especially that 2021 season. And in fact, it was a victory over Chelsea that arguably turned things for Arteta. But there was a point where he could barely get a goal, let alone a win. And I think this is what's particularly interesting with Potter in that regard. I think it's now become evident that what Arteta was doing at that point was basically trying to impose a tactical idea on the team that was difficult to integrate, required a fair bit of understanding from his squad. And at that point, looked slow and prescribed. And now we can see that now the players have internalized, essentially, there's so much more to it. And that does sound a little bit like Chelsea now. Now, whether it produces the same results, we can't say. I think there are fair questions over whether this has maybe been a step up too soon. I mean, because he went from Brighton to Chelsea, from essentially a mid-table Premier League club, if an upwardly mobile one, to a Champions League club with no step in between. And there are fair questions maybe about the adjustment to the dressing room in that regard. But certainly, Chelsea feel it's an investment in the same way that they're doing with a lot of players. And it feels like these are words we're going to be repeating a lot until the end of the season, or at least until something changes with Chelsea's form.
Well, let's stick with Potter then before we get to the club owners, because, Mark, the top line of your piece sort of alludes to what Miguel has just said. Graham Potter looks to be ill-equipped and underqualified for the Chelsea manager's job. Why?
Well, because, like Miguel said, the step was too big. And not only that, I just don't think he has the personality and the credentials for the job. And I think, in many ways, the comparison of, Nathan Jones at Southampton, again, step up to Southampton, too big. The people who are making these decisions are people like Todd Bowley and the Southampton directors. What qualifications do they have? What expertise do they have? But at the end of the day, they've made their decisions. And when it comes to hiring and firing again, they'll remain. The guys who've made the big mistakes in hiring will remain in place. The manager who they've brought in incorrectly will move on. Now, for me, there's too many football clubs now that are hiring managers because of agent influence or for the wrong idea, for the wrong reasons. I look at Everton. Sean Dyche wasn't a candidate for Everton when they sacked Frank Lampard. It was Marcelo Bielsa and a couple of others. Dyche became the manager because of circumstances. Now, Dyche will probably turn out to be the best decision that Everton have made for a long time because he may keep them up, but it will by accident rather than by design. Now, with Chelsea and Potter, I just think that Todd Bowley has sacked one of the best managers in Europe in Thomas Tuchel for no apparent reason beyond the fact that he didn't really fit the model that he wanted to use. And it just doesn't seem to have made Chelsea any better. Potter doesn't seem to have any control over the dressing room, the players, the tactics. Now, Miguel was right about Arteta. You could see what was happening at Arsenal. You could see the plan. I don't see any plan at Chelsea with Potter. And I just wonder whether Todd Bowley's made that decision without the knowledge that is required. And too many senior figures at clubs are doing the same thing. We look at Ed Woodward's time at Man United, the same sort of thing. Incorrect decisions, lack of expertise at the boardroom level, and it's making mistakes that get repeated and repeated and repeated.
I guess, Miguel, to try and maybe put a case forward for Graham Potter, the level of investment and the number of players that arrived at Chelsea, even a more established manager than Potter would struggle to try and marry this all together and get it working in a short space of time.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose it's almost a flip of what we were saying a few moments ago in terms of the financial stretch, but this is almost the case with them, because usually the higher wage bill, the more you spend, there's a direct translation into results. That's the correlation has been the truth of football for the last 2 decades. But in this case, at least in the immediate short term, you can see why it would cause potential issues just because there are so many players to integrate. Well, he's going to have every single week, or really, every 3 days, given how often Chelsea play with European football, he's going to have, about 20 players quite irritated that they've not been picked. That's the potential for a lot of kind of ructions in the dressing room. And there are at least issues from that perspective. I mean, in many ways, I suppose Potter has been thrown into a job that requires a lot of learning on the job. And so many issues have gone against him. I think one of the reasons why they've been quite sympathetic to him so far, the Chelsea owners, because of the amount of injuries they've had. Well, I suppose depth isn't an issue at the moment, though.